Good morning and welcome to the new edition of Dr. Lamba's Awakening Call. To be or not to be, mused Hamlet, unable to decide what to do. And today, the leaders the word over, the experts the word over, and all of us word over are musing in a different way. It is to lockdown or not to lockdown. The countries the world over have witnessed lockdowns. And those lockdowns have thrown life out of gear. Should they have or should they not have? The second wave of coronavirus is coming, and I'm talking about the lockdown. Not because the lockdowns have been there, but what might happen as the winter comes. The fears are that the second wave and the third wave are going to be more disastrous. Would the countries once again resort to lockdown the way Spain is doing now, where lockdown has become so rigorous that you can't believe it? It was deemed that if people are kept confined to their homes, the infection would not spread. And yet it did spread. But it created more problems than it solved. And the countries world over witnessed these lockdowns, and would they witness again? And here comes World Health Organization. I'm not very fond of World Health Organization. Their work has been shoddy, but that is because the politicians control it. Otherwise, the doctors working over there are possibly the best doctors available in the world. And whosoever expresses an opinion that deviates from what the politicians think is shown the door. If not immediately, at least you can be sure that within a short time the person is dumped and he finds himself not only unemployed but unemployable. The latest example is Dr. David Nabarro, the chief virologist of WHO. Now, virologists are people who are concerned with the virus. And he says his exact words are, we do not advocate lockdown as the primary means of control of this virus. Why not? That's a question. But then Nabarro has an answer ready for that. Lockdowns make poor people a lot more poorer. Do they save lives? No. Then why walk lockdowns? Why is it that sane politicians who have the interest of the people at heart still do it? Is it an overreaction? Is it an expression of wanton fear that gives rise to irrational decisions? Or just it's an expression, or rather a vicarious player in asserting their authoritarianism? These can be the various reasons for the lockdown. Otherwise, why should they be locked down? I was amused to read that an asteroid is rushing towards the Earth and is likely to bypass the Earth at a distance of 250,000 kilometers away from the space. So the chances of asteroid hitting the Earth, what are they? NASA calculates it at 0.042%. Extremely remote. And then chances of dying from COVID, what are they? If you tabulate all the results, it is 0.026%. So 0.042% from asteroid hitting the Earth, which can cause a disaster. And from COVID, they are 50% less than being hit by asteroid. And yet we are indulging in lockdowns, putting on masks. Should we not put on helmets and armors to protect ourselves from the asteroid? That's $1 million question. But then coming back, leave that aside. Let's look at what has happened. Nabarro says it makes poor people poorer. Yes, it does. We saw it in India, where hundreds and thousands of the laborers who were left unemployed trekked for days together to reach home. And when they reached home, the condition was no go better. So they wanted to come back, making them poorer still. People make irrational decisions. And these irrational decisions of the people are the result of the irrational decisions of the government. Imagine, I was amused. I was held up in India at the time and couldn't travel. Anyway, I took one of those mercy flights, paying 3 times more fare than I would have paid. Reached, and there was no flight back to Calgary, so I had to go to Montreal. Fair enough. From Montreal, there's no flight to Calgary, so I fly from Montreal to Toronto. And incidentally spent the night in Montreal, the hotel. I wait in Toronto for 4 hours, take another flight to Calgary. I'm mixing with the people at the airports, at Montreal Airport, at Toronto Airport. Of course, maintaining a bit of a distance, but not 2 meters as envisaged. No, there was a crowd. You couldn't help it. And then I reached Calgary. And then I have to put myself in 14 days quarantine. Fair enough. It was self imposed quarantine. We did it. But then look at the ridiculous aspect. I've interacted with the people at Montreal Airport. I've interacted with the people in Toronto. And then in Montreal, well, I'm there. Now, is that needed? Or was it not irrational? The rationality would have been either the trip should not have been there, or I should have come home directly. The flight should have been such in a sterilized atmosphere, which it was not. Bombay was especially horrible. Anyway, the point is, there is now time to make things clear. In the world over, lockdowns have ruined the industries, which employed tens of millions of the low income group people. It's the lowest strata which is suffering. And that is just the economic side of it. Life is not only economy. Man doesn't live by bread alone. Are you aware that the suicide rates have increased by 18% in this period of lockdown? Depression has increased by 28.7%. Domestic violence and family discords increased by 52.8%. Drug abuse, substance abuse increased by more than 60%. After all, what shall people do if they have nothing to do? They'll either fight with each other or escape into the unreal world by taking drugs. And premature deaths because you can't get regular checkups. All we hear about is the danger of virus. But we rarely hear about the horrendous problem the lockdowns abroad. And we have seen it. Isn't it ironic that the World Health Organization, a very, very incompetent organization till now, is warning that the lockdowns devastate the poor at precisely the same time? Precisely. The Democrats in USA are demanding socialism. They are supposed to represent poor and they continue to urge lockdowns. Is the liberals, the Democrats, the so-called spokesmen and the guardians of the poor who want lockdown. The conservatives are pushing away, Republicans are not asking for the lockdown. In India, the lockdown is over practically, so much so that even the cinemas and the schools are likely to start. And one interesting point has emerged, very interesting, and that is that a study was done by the Brown University. And what the study revealed was that one child out of 1,000 got virus going back to school. One out of 1,000. Maybe more children get fever and cold. Maybe more children get diphtheria. Maybe more children fall down and break their arms. It's an extremely low risk. It pales into insignificance when compared to educational and personal damage from lockdowns. Online teaching is no teaching. We have said earlier it can be a sportive thing, but it cannot replace the classroom teaching. And it should not. The human element is missing. And yet, we ignore that. The schools are closed. And if they're open the way they are open, in one of the schools they're using loudspeakers, the children are spread out. But what happens in the overpopulated countries like India and China or Pakistan? Has somebody thought of that? The herd immunity, again, may be good, may not be good. But when you interact with the people and use a mask, it has been proved scientifically that masks do not protect. And if the masks are really protection, they are disposable, all right. But then why are they not incinerated as hazardous products? If PPE, the clothes that are worn by the front workers and then incinerated, because the virus might otherwise escape. So why hasn't government arranged for incineration, the burning of the mask? If that was done, I could have understood it. But here, I've seen people just throw them in the garbage. So the virus is still there. The dirt is still there. The possibility of it lingering and feeding on other live organisms. Our virus is a live organism. And if you don't burn it up, it would still be destroyed. So masks are good. I'm not saying they are bad. They are minor protection, but then the way they are being used, they are no protection. As a matter of fact, we need shields. And then another thing, curious thing comes up along with the lockdowns. On the one side, like today government is banning plastics. And all the face shields that are made from plastic. So you are encouraging plastic use in one form and discouraging it in the other form. What a contradiction. But what Dr. Nabarro says should be a clear signal to the government that they don't need to lock down the way Ontario is doing. The second wave, they become panicky. And panic results in disastrous results. Fear, as I always say, is a black godmother of all damnable things. As I was saying, lockdowns are no solution. Apart from destroying the economy, they are destroying the family life. They are destroying the optimistic view, turning people into maniacs and depressive maniacs, encouraging domestic violence, and discouraging children from going out and enjoying nature and playing. Imagine imprisoning a child in a home that he can't go anywhere. This is a cruelty unblemished, plain, simple, crude, but pure, unadulterated cruelty, mental and physical both. So, this is a clarion call to the politicians. I know they want lockdowns for the simple reason it helps them assert their authoritarianism. And in the lockdown, there can be no protest, no demonstrations, nothing. So, they are good. But the very fact that the demonstrations have taken place, especially these Black Lives Matter, there was no social distancing, and more people didn't die. As a matter of fact, the number of the people dying has decreased slowly. So, lockdown or no lockdown, coronavirus would have its toll. Why add to that the economic, the psychological, the moral, and the criminal aspects to it? I wish there were no lockdowns and the politicians understood it that there's a need to have other steps than indulge in this absolutely infantile exercise. Thank you.